Hello and welcome to NDTV. I'm Aditya Kaul. India and Ireland are working on a paradigm shift in the economic partnership and cooperation over the last few months. There is an advisory panel that has been made, but there have been some sticking points also in the last few months. To speak about that and also the road ahead, joining me is Ambassador of Ireland to New Delhi, Kevin Kelly. Thank you very much, Ambassador, for joining us.
Thank you, Aditya. Lovely to be here.
Well, I would begin by asking you about the economic cooperation because that's the high point of the relationship right now. We had the advisory panel that was made recently,
Yes.
and there are some targets that have been kept in mind. So please tell us about the targets that you have and what are the key recommendations of this economic advisory panel?
Okay, so, well, first of all, to say that the bilateral trade between India and Ireland is actually very healthy. It's about 16 billion euros in two-way trade a year, which is more than 10% of the total EU. So it's not bad for a small country like Ireland. But of course, we really feel we can grow that trade and do much more. That's why we've invested. We have a new strategy for this region in South Asia, and we're trying to really step up our engagement. Minister Jaishankar came to Dublin earlier this year, and to mark his visit, our government signed off on a new action plan for enhanced engagement. So a whole range of actions as part of that. Of course, increasing our people-to-people links, increasing our cultural engagement, but of course also political links between the two countries and economic. So as you mentioned, we established this one step was to establish a high-level economic panel with some senior Indian industrialists who have an interest and a support for Ireland to advise our government about how to engage more. So they gave very practical advice about what we should do to improve the relationship, how we should make it easier for workers from India to move to Ireland, how we should perhaps look at issues to do with our regulation as much as we can. We're a part of the European Union, so we're very much guided by that, but very much advising our government about what the next level of our engagement should be, and we're very optimistic for the future.
I also noticed that the visit of Dr. H. Jaishankar to Ireland was historic in many ways because it happened for the first time in a decade or so. How significant was that as you spoke about it? And secondly, I'm hearing that there is a migration and mobility agreement also under work. So what's the status of that and what is that looking into?
Well, as you said, it was a really important visit for us. We did have Prime Minister Modi came to visit soon after he came to power in India, and we were really delighted to host him in Ireland. And I'm hoping that will continue in the future. There is also the possibility of a presidential visit. We have a new president in Ireland, just elected last month, also a woman president. So it would be wonderful if we got President Murmu to Ireland, and there is an invitation there. We had hoped that visit would take place this year, but I'm hoping that will happen again next year. So Minister Jaishankar's visit was important. We discussed a whole range of issues, not just mobility. In fact, there's already very high levels of mobility between Ireland and India. I don't know if you know, but that our largest visa office in the world, outside of Dublin, is in New Delhi.
Incredible.
It's not in London, it's not anywhere else, it's in New Delhi. And we're issuing a huge number of visas for Indians to come. And these are great, they're professionals, they're working across our health sector, of course, it's really important. They're working in tech and pharmaceuticals and a whole range of sectors. And in fact, they're doing extremely well in Ireland. So we would hope to see that continue. We have a very healthy number of Indian students coming to Ireland. I think after Germany, within the EU, we may be the second most popular destination for Indian students. And the one good thing we have is that we have this stay-back scheme so that Indian students, once they graduated in Ireland, they're entitled to a work permit and they can stay for 1 or 2 years depending on their degree. So that to us is a really important part of this relationship. Of course, people travelling between the two countries is always going to be the lifeblood of a bilateral relationship.
Ambassador Kelly, can I ask you something that only diplomats can answer? You know, I want to ask you and tell you about this magic ball that you have, which you can actually roll and tell us that can the India-EU free trade agreement also be a possibility in the next few weeks?
Well, I really wish I had that crystal ball, Aditya, and I don't, but we're really optimistic. We're really hoping there's such energy. Of course, this is an agreement that's been negotiated, very tough negotiations, and I think both sides are very clear on what they want from that agreement. We see real opportunities. There's a win-win here. It's a huge market for India in terms of, and a very mature market with about 550 600 million people, and look at the size of the Indian market. So there's real opportunities for mutual benefit there. I'm really optimistic it's going to happen. I think the visit by Ursula von der Leyen, who's the President of the European Commission, to India with a whole college, they call them, of commissioners a few months ago, was a really powerful political signal. And they were treated so warmly and greeted by the Prime Minister and his team. So I think both of those leaders have committed to making this happen. As we know, there's plans for an EU-India summit early next year, and we're hoping that that summit could be an opportunity for this deal. But I'm afraid I don't have the crystal ball. I'm not in the tunnel, as they say, negotiating these things. And, Indian negotiators are tough and EU negotiators are tough. But I think both sides really want a deal.
Well, we do hope that we are out of the tunnel soon and there is something mutually beneficial. But Ambassador, moving on from the economic cooperation to the cultural connect, you have been somebody, often speaking about the historic international 26th Hornbill Festival in Nagaland. Yes. How incredible is this for Ireland to come as an official partner, and what kind of a color, what kind of a cultural connect do you see? I heard you somewhere where you say that you almost feel like home in Ireland. What were your first experiences in Nagaland, and how do you see the future of this cooperation?
Well, really great that I have an opportunity to talk about this. So we're a small country, Ireland, and, although us Irish people are very aware of India and our historical connection, our freedom fighters, our revolutionaries who fought for freedom and for independence to create a democratic India and a democratic Ireland, they were friends and they swapped notes and they exchanged. So from an Irish perspective, we really look at India very fondly. But India is so huge, such a young population. How many people know about Ireland? They might know some of our pop stars or these martial arts fighters or whatever, but to know really our country. So what we try to do is to try to showcase Ireland. And one great way to do it is culture. And Indian people and Irish people have a shared love of culture, music, art, literature, dance, theatre, all of those things. So last year we did a big splash in Calcutta and this year in Nagaland. And that's deliberate. We don't want to just do everything in Delhi and Mumbai. We want to really reach out to the far parts of this wonderful country. So we were really honoured when we were chosen by the government of Nagaland to be a partner country for this year. So that was a long introduction. Answer to your question is we're going to bring music. We're bringing one of a really amazing band. They're very, very lively. They're called Bowen. They've been put together especially for this visit to India. But in fact, a good number of that group that's coming are members of a very successful group called the Mary Wallopers. Okay. This is a band that played Glastonbury to thousands and thousands of people. So they're a really well-known group in Ireland. If there's a concert or a festival, they attract thousands and thousands of people. And we're bringing them to Nagaland. We're bringing theatre. We're bringing some authors who are going to discuss literature. And we also have a big surprise for the people of Nagaland. We're going to be unveiling a massive art installation that was produced by Bengali and Irish artists. And it's a Celtic goddess, 16 feet high. And her name is Danu, she's a Celtic goddess. And we will be hopefully unveiling her as well during the festival.
Well, best wishes with that. Could we see a slice of Nagaland and West Bengal in Ireland as well? Some of the people visiting there?
I really hope so. Your embassy in Dublin is very active, actually. They're a really busy, productive embassy in Dublin, led by Ambassador Mishra, and they do a lot in terms of trying to bring Indian culture to Ireland. The one advantage you have is that in Ireland, there's maybe the official figure we often quote is 100,000, but it's more likely to be about 140,000 Indians living in Ireland, which is not much when you're sitting in Delhi, but that's a huge number. We're only a population of 4.5 million people. And so those people are really well organised. They have community groups. There's Diwali is celebrated. All the major Indian holidays are celebrated. We have a very small Indian diaspora, or Irish diaspora in India, so we have a lot to do as a small team here to make up for that.
Well, since you're speaking about the diaspora, I have to ask you an uncomfortable question, and that's about the recent attacks that happened in Ireland. We saw statements and a lot of meetings happening in Dublin. Yeah. You yourself have issued statements to clarify what the Irish government has been doing in that. But a lot of these people are dubbing these as racist attacks. They're saying that, this cannot be tolerated in this century, in this time. So how seriously does the Irish government take these attacks, and what kind of an initiative has been taken, perhaps in cooperation with the Indian embassy there, to make it sure that this doesn't happen in future?
Look, this was a horrible experience. It happened mostly during the summer. I hope it's something in the past. It was a horrible experience for the Indian community who, rightly felt that something terrible was happening. There was a spate of attacks over a period of time during the summer months. So the Indian community were, of course, understandably very concerned, but also the Irish community were horrified. The Irish media covered it extensively. There were communities protesting to protect and show support for their Indian brothers and sisters. And in fact, one very positive story in the middle of this terrible experience was that in a place where one of the attacks happened, the local football team, which attracts thousands of people to these games in their stadium, invited members of the Indian community onto the pitch at halftime, and the whole stadium applauded and showed their support. So yes, the government has taken this very seriously. My minister spoke out. Our president, former president now, spoke out. Our prime minister, our Taoiseach, spoke out. The police force set up a special liaison unit to deal with to kind of support the Indian community and to liaise with the embassy there. And, some arrests have happened. The sad reality is that, these attacks were carried out by young teenagers, juveniles. We don't know where they're being fed this kind of sick attitudes around attacking people. Hopefully, we've seen the end of it. There was such an outcry in Ireland. But you asked me, could we guarantee, or, it's very difficult in any city in the world. Yeah. So people have to be careful. I know that myself. My own son is in France. Yeah. And I also advise him, stay away from certain areas, be careful. So,
Ambassador, you are known for speaking out, your mind very openly. And on this issue, I want to ask you, it's not just about Ireland. It's about many cities across the globe, as you rightly pointed out. Do you think that there is a rise in xenophobia all across because of some of the policies that have been introduced by some political leaders all across the globe? And there needs to be empathy, there needs to be much more understanding and accommodation?
Well, look, I think that you'd be blind if you didn't say or see or admit that there has been a rise in terms of xenophobia and anti-immigration sentiment in many parts of the world. I won't talk about other countries. I'll say in my own country, one thing that I'm kind of happy about is that they still don't have any political voice. There is no political party in Ireland espousing these views that have any seats in our parliament, and so they don't have a formal political voice. Does that mean they don't exist? No, we have seen a number of protests and anti-immigration, and it is very unsettling. Of course, it's most unsettling for people who are coming to our country, the vast majority, like the Indian community, contributing hugely to our economy. In fact, when these incidents happened over the summer, our foreign minister came out very emotionally and passionately and said, do we know these Indian people are running our health service? They're running our hospitals. They're, without them we would be lost. So there's a huge recognition about the value of immigration. And Ireland has become a much more diverse country than it was when I was young. But, are we immune to this kind of movements that we see in different parts of the world, and in certain countries there are political parties that espouse these views, even in Europe. So no, we're not, but what we have to do is we have to be very aware of it. We have to educate our public. We have to be very open about protecting people and immigrants. And I think I'm hoping that, I hear from my Indian friends in Ireland and from the embassy that they have felt supported and they have felt listened to, and hopefully that our government has shown that we're very strongly opposed to these kind of activities.
Ambassador, moving on from Dublin back to New Delhi. Recently, unfortunately, we saw on the 10th of November a dastardly terror attack happening not very far from where we are standing at the Red Fort, a historic Red Fort in New Delhi. I'm sure you would have visited around that area. It's the old part of the city. And before that, we had a terror attack in Pahalgam in India's Jammu and Kashmir. How does Ireland look at such terror attacks? Do you think this also calls for more counter-terrorism cooperation, not just between India and Ireland, but globally at the level of the United Nations also? There needs to be much done to counter terrorism.
Look, Ireland is no stranger to this, sadly. We've had our own very bloody past, and we've had, decades of conflict in the north of Ireland, and we had incidents of terrorism on different sides of the community, and many people lost their lives, and many people were maimed. There were bomb attacks. There was, absolute outrage. So, in fact, when this most recent attack that you mentioned at the Red Fort, my heart always almost stops, because it's the memory of what we know what that's like when innocent people are caught up in something which they shouldn't be. There is no space, there's no justification in the world for terrorism, and I think Ireland has always been unequivocal about that, wherever it happens across the globe, not just on our own island or on the islands of Ireland and the UK. We've always been opposed to terrorism. So of course there's scope for cooperation, and I think that there is a lot happening between India and its partners in terms of counter-terrorism. So I think my minister spoke out after that attack, as we did after the dreadful attack in Pahalgam, because these things are very dangerous, not just for the loss of life for the people affected, but also for the spin-off consequences. We saw what happened after the Pahalgam attack, and we had an outbreak of hostilities. Now, so I think it is really important that there is cooperation internationally on counter-terrorism, and that we, as a partner and a friend of India, that we do speak out when we see this happening.
And Ambassador, you're also ambassador to Dhaka. So speak a little about your experience of visiting Bangladesh quite a couple of times this year, and you've interacted with Mohammed Yunus, his cabinet colleagues, etc., and you got access to what kind of a mindset they have or what they are planning to do. And the biggest talking point has been the election that has to happen. So, and you've been also trying, I think you took a delegation there and were working out on the police reforms. So could you tell a little more about that visit?
Well, look, Bangladesh is at a very delicate time in its history. It went through its not even a year, is it, since the July rising, the July uprising, and it has been, the country went through terrible turmoil during that period. The transitional government now, we understand, is preparing for elections. This will be very, very critical that everything is put in place, that these elections are as free and fair as they can be. I know that there's a huge amount of debate and activity happening. I'm just back from Dhaka, like you said, and I know that there's a lot of debate about how to make that happen, what reforms need to be put in place. There's the July Charter that has been put in place, which is a very ambitious reform programme, and I know that the parties are still debating about how that July Charter can help shape the next phase of Bangladesh's development. So, look, as Ireland, we're a small country, but we want to be as constructive and helpful as we can. And so we did meet with Professor Yunus, and we met with some senior members of the interim government. And I was very happy that we were able to bring over a very senior person from our own peace process. This was the first police ombudsman in Northern Ireland. In Northern Ireland, back in 1998, when we had our peace agreement, our police force was completely discredited in Northern Ireland. It was called the Royal Ulster Constabulary, and it was widely seen as representing only one community in Northern Ireland. The police force had to be completely reformed, and a new service, a deliberate move from being a police force to a police service, was established, and there was new structures for accountability put in place. So Baroness Nuala O'Lone was the first appointed ombudsman. So we went in at the invitation of the interim government, and we had discussions. We met with civil society, we met with some politicians, we met with some of the leaders, we met with the police, and all we did was to share our experience. We're not saying we have the perfect system. In fact, one of the main points we made is that this kind of transition takes a long time to happen. So 1998 was our peace agreement. We're now in 2025, and we're still working out parts of that in terms of the legacy of violence, the protection of victims, reparations, all of those issues. So hopefully it won't take Bangladesh as long as it took us. So our efforts there were purely as kind of a neutral friend to come in and say, this is what we did, was our experience, and we're ready to offer that kind of support. We did find, I'm not going to stray into any party political things, but we did find that with the police and with the civil society and with the academia and students that we met, everybody wants a new Bangladesh. And there was genuine interest in trying to pick up some bits and pieces from the Irish experience. And I did find that there was a genuine appetite for learning from that experience.
Ambassador, without entering the terrain of a political commentary, I want to ask you about, free and fair elections in Bangladesh. Because Awami League has been banned there, Sheikh Hasina is here in Delhi. And of course, Sheikh Hasina gave an interview to me recently where she said that, this is not right, the kind of death sentence that has been given to her, and she wants free and fair elections, and she wants to return to power. So would you expect this to happen, free and fair elections? Because I remember when I think Nahid Islam spoke to you, Minister, he told you that free and fair elections would be there and a new political party will come up, which did. How do you see, as an outside perspective, without entering any political terrain?
Your question demands that I'd enter into that, so I actually won't, to be honest with you. All I will say to you is that, it is a very critical time. Right. There's a real need now for the Election Commission in Bangladesh to try to do what it can to have free and fair elections. I won't comment on former Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina and what she said, or the exclusion of the Awami League. I think that's for the Bangladeshi people to decide. Sure. But all I would say is that I think it'll be really critically important for the next phase of Bangladesh's development that these elections take place and that they gain as much support as possible within the country so that the outcome of those elections is respected. So I think that's all I'll say.
Perfect. One last question to you about Nepal. You visited Nepal. You are, ambassador to several countries in the region. But Nepal has also seen a transition. In fact, yes. I remember I was in the Nepalese parliament when the entire ransacking and the burning happened. Wow. I was reporting from there, and those were historic visuals, but also sad in many ways. But there is Sushila Karki, who has a very honest image. She is transparent in many ways. She was the first woman Chief Justice as well. Yes. And recently, when you visited Nepal, there was a kind of a fund that was generated to equip and strengthen the civil society. So how do you see that? And how do you see free and fair elections happening in Nepal as well in a few months?
Well, now, I have to admit that I haven't been there since the latest, since the violence happened. And so I haven't yet met the new interim government. And we're following it as much as we can from our contacts in Kathmandu and also with our partners. So again, we hope that Nepal will be, at least, there was, the violence was contained, and of course there was, destruction, and there was a very tense number of days. So I'm hoping that the country will be able to find its way through to elections. So in terms of our partners, our civil society partners are more working in terms of community development. They're not engaged really in the kind of civil society political space. So we wouldn't necessarily be engaging with them on those issues. In fact, many of them are not based in Kathmandu, and they work more in the rural areas. So I'm really looking forward to going back. I wish Nepal well. I hope that because we did see, as you said, in Bangladesh, and then this happened in Nepal, and there had been similar, as we know, in Sri Lanka a couple of years ago. So I think what's important to learn from this for us all is that young people need to be listened to, and that it can be a problem when there's youth unemployment and young people feel alienated and they don't feel involved in the system. So I think hopefully out of these two countries, what might emerge is a system that's a little bit more responsive to being aware about, what young people and what they also need a future, and they need a country that they can believe in so that they can work for and move forward as well.
Well, Ambassador Kevin Kelly, thank you very much for joining NDTV.
Thank you so much.